last point, Mary, you hit on something I want to come back to. In the meantime, Bob had an observation.
What Frank was getting at is the alternative is public government that's transparent and responsive, or private government. We're now beginning to realize that the economic crisis in Europe, when 6 years ago the German franc was rolled into the European euro, 17 of the 27 European countries joined the euro, and it was principally Germany that wanted the franc, that wanted a stable economy. And Greece joined because Goldman Sachs, with hundreds of millions of dollars of fees, basically a private government, Goldman Sachs, on which we have no influence. The people in Greece have some influence on their government. We have enormous influence with our elected officials. But Goldman Sachs, we're now estimating maybe taken $500 million in fees from Greece, and they hid from the Europeans the economic crisis that Greece was in. They were able to manipulate the documents. They're now starting to be, so when you step away from public government and go to private governments like Goldman Sachs, $100 billion financial house, that's where the real trouble is. The alternative to public government is the Goldman Sachs kind of, they could be saints, they could be angelic and think only of the well-being of the human, but as Frank points out, oftentimes private governments are very greedy and they're completely unresponsive, where public governments are totally responsive.
I definitely agree with you as far as the public governments and private governments, but the thing is, you're drawing a distinction, and I'd like to kind of move in a different direction by drawing the distinction between no government, and there's a big difference between a government and self-governance and having voluntary interactions. And I think the problem with corporations, and it's indeed huge problems, these greedy corporations, and you got the Occupy movement that's all about, breaking that down and pointing it out to people. But both are bad. I mean, this collective entity, this corporation, is given this legitimacy, and they're hand in hand. The government and these private governments and these quote-unquote public governments are hand in hand and deeply entrenched. I mean, they're helping each other out, and you got lobbyists, and you got, there's all sorts of problems that can arise from that. So I definitely agree with you on that. But like I said, there's a difference between self-responsibility and self-governance and a government, as in having rulers. Whether you have a choice every couple of years or whatever to elect your rulers or not, I just want the option to opt out. I mean, if you want to elect a ruler and follow,
No, I want water treatment plants, I want a court system, I want the National Disease Control, I want the National Health Institute, I want not feces in the street, and that's what government is created to do.
Not advocating.
Well, and the only way that occurs is if you have a collective activity that creates water treatment plants and creates both sanitary sewers and water sewers, and sets up pipelines for bringing in water versus going to a faucet and getting in a bucket. Government provides us collectively doing things. Individualism, if you're extraordinarily wealthy and have a lot of people assisting you because your wealth can hire people, then individualism works. But if you're a regular person, good luck on getting your own water treatment plant, your own fresh water.
I have the same needs there as far as the water thing, as far as, all these things can be provided. Are you willing to consider that there are non-coercive means? Can these things be provided voluntarily? There was roads before there was government. There was, we don't need governments.
We'll go back and pick up on that. We have another question.
I find it kind of interesting. I see where you're coming from, and I was there, years ago, and I understand that, and I understand how, the thought of having a self-regulated, non-form of government is amazing. But the problem is that people crave government, they crave, these hierarchies. And, the Occupy Wall Street movement is a great example of that. It took them literally days in the Occupy Wall Street movement to set up a board so that they could basically have people there who were making decisions for the group as a whole.
That's voluntary.
They're using a general assembly.
Well, but now those board members changed all the time. which was the thing that drove the media nuts, because there was no one spokesperson.
It's everybody.
Right?
It's Quaker General Assembly.
But now, I mean, you know, having been into it for 3 weeks or a month or whatever, you know, they've actually, like, you know, they're using a nonprofit status from another company, and you know, they're paying expenses, and you know, all of these things, and that is you know, there's a hierarchy there that is in place. Even though those people, the specific people are changing, it's no different from our government.
It is different because it's voluntary.
It's just that the people change more rapidly in the Occupy Wall Street movement than they do in our government. We elect ours every 4 years. They elect theirs every day or whatever. But you know, it's kind of the same thing, and you see that time and time again. And the other thing is that when you find a government that's weaker, you're going to find an area where religion is extremely strong, and vice versa. When you find a very strong government, you're going to find religion is extremely limited. And it's because of the craving of people in terms of wanting that structure, wanting that hierarchy in place, wanting people to be able to do things and get these massive projects done and things like that. And so it's that sliding scale. You know, we actually have schools here in Michigan where they've gone from 4% you know, subsidized lunches and low-income people to 25% just in the past few years. And what's happening is government is pulling money out of these schools, government is cutting funding, and the churches are coming in and running programs. And these are public schools, you know, and they're not allowed to proselytize during school hours, but they have additional curricula after school where they are allowed to do that. And it's a big takeover of religion, you know, filling these social voids that government is pulling out.
And so your main point is people. Endemic to the human condition is a sense of needing structure, needing organization, needing some hierarchical structure at that. And Bob Collins is going to be presenting in 2 weeks. We're not meeting next week, but in 2 weeks he's going to be talking about that evolutionary drive towards community. Yeah. So you wanted to hear that, and I'll bring that up at the end of the meeting. Yes, you had a question.
Real similar to what this gentleman, I'm Lisa, by the way.
I'm Alex.
Was saying, I was going to say, you can see that you want it to be volunteer, but we're pack animals. That's what we are. That's why we have dogs, because they're pack animals too, and we understand the way each other function. We can try and say it's all voluntarism, but we are. If there's more than 3 people in a room, we're gonna arrange each other. I mean, we're gonna put ourselves into whatever position that we feel comfortable. Well, and the bigger the group, the more we're gonna have a power structure. It's just what we do. Some people like to be leaders, some people like to be followers, some people like to be workers, some people like to be. It's going to happen. The bigger group you get, the more you tend towards a formal government. And we have a lot of people on the earth right now. So getting away from government, I think, is impossible, because we've been making governments for ourselves since we were cavemen. So I just think it's too much in us.
So Mary, to help us along here, can you give us an example using the people in this room? We are a group. Can you give us an example of what your vision for this group would be, and how we could get along when we have disparate needs, disparate wants, without a structure, where we all voluntarily, volitionally choose to participate?
Yeah.
What would that look like? And how would we get things done?
This is a voluntary organization. I wanted to, make I gotta point something out. I mean, the occupiers and the government, there's definitely organization in both. And when people get together and want to accomplish things in groups, I mean, obviously there has to be cooperation of some sort. What I have an issue with is the forced participation and the forced cooperation. You're not forced to go down and occupy Wall Street and